And you know what I think is corny? That standard punk message of identifying as a loser and a failure and admitting defeat. I think that is the corniest thing of all. What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock NBA, and let me start with a little bit of word association. Kyles, Chads, rednecks, douchebags. There's a go-to list of bands for anybody who wants to turn their nose up at those people. Five Finger Death Punch, Godsmack, and Pantera would be the obvious examples here. And it's very likely that you have Hatebreed on that list too. And you aren't entirely wrong to include them, but they are much more than just that. And I'm obviously biased because I have two Hatebreed tattoos. But what I hope to convince you of in this video is that Hatebreed is in fact one of the most thoughtful, insightful, and actually emotionally intelligent bands in the scene. They're actually kind of deep. So are the Hatebreed haters wrong? Are Hatebreed just My Chemical Romance for guys who wear basketball jerseys and crowd kill? And if so, what exactly does that mean? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see all my videos. And also, I want to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Raid Shadow Legends is a turn-based dark fantasy RPG that's free to play for iOS, Android, and PC. And if you want to check it out, just use my links below to download Raid right now. My personal favorite part of the game is how deep you can go with customization and upgrades. Every one of the champions has multiple equipment slots that you can fill different artifacts, and each one of those artifacts can be upgraded in multiple different ways. And this month, Raid just released their biggest update ever. The main event here is the Doom Tower. It's a giant tower with 120 floors, a bunch of secret challenge rooms, and 12 seriously badass bosses to take on. On top of that, they're also releasing 14 new champions just in time for the holidays. So there's really never been a better time to start playing than right now. And the best part is that the Raid team are giving away a bunch of new free goodies, plus a super special champion named Bulwark. And if you are a new player, you'll get your free Void Champion Bulwark, 50 gems, an XP booster, some energy refills, and even an Ancient Shard as soon as you get in game. And all this treasure will be waiting for you right here. So it is that easy. Just click the link in the description and I'll see you in the game. And with that out of the way, let's get into it.
You fucking bleed now!
Before I get into exactly why Hatebreed is great and amazing, let me just give you a quick overview of their career so you have some context for anybody who may not be familiar. Although a lot of people now think of them as a metal band, at their core, Hatebreed is a hardcore band. They started out back in 1994 in Connecticut, coming up in that East Coast hardcore scene back then, which kind of blows my mind because Jamey and I are the same age. We're within a couple months of each other, and I can't imagine starting Hatebreed when I was 15 or 16. But even back then, they were great, head and shoulders above almost everybody else in the scene, and so they quickly started getting a buzz, especially after their Under the Knife demo came out in, I think, 95 or 96. Still a classic in my opinion. And on the back of that demo, they signed to Victory Records a couple years later, who were the kings of hardcore at the time. And they put out their first full-length album, Satisfaction is the Death of Desire, in 1997, which apparently became the fastest selling hardcore record of all time. And that is what kicked off their career. A lot of people hold this up as their best album, but I disagree. Yes, it is a great hardcore record, but it's just that. It wasn't until they put out Perseverance in 2002 that they really became the Hatebreed that I love so much that I got those two tattoos. Which brings me to the actual topic of this video. Exactly why do I hold Hatebreed in such high regard when so many other people think of them as just lowest common denominator trash for rednecks? And why did I refer to them as emotionally intelligent? To me, what's special about Hatebreed is that they represent the thing that's essentially defined my whole life. Being aware that you are a deeply flawed person, struggling to overcome those flaws and be a better version of yourself. Dealing with anger and bitterness and resentment and frustration, but not letting them get the best of you. If you've listened to a lot of Hatebreed, you know what I'm talking about, but for those who haven't,
facing what consumes you is the only way to be free. Release from those poisonous fears.
or
Awaken the dormant force. Awaken the light within. Awaken, it must be done.
what it comes down to me is duality. That Hatebreed deals with that combination of both extremely negative and extremely positive emotions. It's not either or, it's both and. What I mean by that is there's plenty of bands that are super dark and negative and take you to that place of where you're just staring into that fucking abyss of depression and anger and addiction. And then on the other hand, there's also music that's very light and positive and upbeat and cheery. And while I definitely appreciate both of those things, to me, music that's pure darkness or pure positivity is just kind of incomplete. In particular, I really never related to the bands where I felt like they just gave in to the negativity. For example, as much as I love Black Flag, a lot of it just kind of feels like wallowing in the negativity, and to some extent, admitting defeat. Just like letting the depression and anger overcome you and define you. And of course, I get it. I mean, I've been there, but man, I do not want to fucking stay there. I want somebody to help me get out of that hole. And I get that people say that it's cathartic to express that stuff, and of course, to some extent, that's true. But I think that that can also be an excuse and a crutch to just kind of stay in that place. Because for a lot of us, it's more comfortable to stay there than to try to get out of it. But you have to. You can't just stay there or it'll kill you. Which is also why it's kind of hard for me to relate to some of the just super upbeat, positive stuff that's like, yay, life is great, be happy because everyone is wonderful and nice, hashtag blessed. Okay, cool, I'm glad you feel that way, but talk to me when you've stayed up for 3 days doing coke in downtown LA, and you're 31 years old, looking in the mirror and wondering how the fuck you let yourself become this disgusting person. Which is why I fell in love with Hatebreed around the time that I was that person. When I had really bottomed out and become that gross person that I hated, and I was terrified that I was gonna stay there. I was scared that that's just who I was. And I was just looking for something to tell me that that wasn't true. I can specifically remember listening to this song and just repeating these lyrics over and over and over.
This day is worth living. This fight is worth fighting. This hope is worth hoping.
That song acknowledges when you're just in the shit, when you're at the bottom and you have those moments where you wonder, what's the point? Is it even worth trying to go on? And where a lot of metal and hardcore kind of stops there and almost like embraces the hopelessness.
I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me?
A song like that comes along and kicks you in the ass and says, yes, it fucking is worth going on. And if you have to take it 1 day at a time or 1 hour or 1 minute at a time, that's okay, but just keep going. And the fact that so much of metal and hardcore can be so negative and defeatist is exactly why I think it's so important that they've always had that core message of self-reliance and believing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
But I never crumbled in the face of adversity. I always force myself to believe.
But before I go on, let me go back to my original point about them being included in the same bucket as bands like Five Finger Death Punch and Godsmack, because it's actually a really important part of this whole conversation, and to be honest, there is some truth to it. For one, their shows were always the most consistently violent out of any band I can think of. I remember when I saw them in Cincinnati in 2009 with, I think, Cannibal Corpse, and I was genuinely surprised that I didn't see anybody get put in an ambulance that night. I mean, you smash together the metal dudes there to see Cannibal Corpse with the Hatebreed crowd in Cincinnati at that time, and that is a good recipe for some violence.
Your doom awaits you.
This was not too long after a good friend of ours got stabbed and almost died at that same venue. So I was thinking like, this is gonna be a fucking bloodbath if there's some metal dude here that doesn't understand what's happening and makes the mistake of picking a fight with the wrong person. Fortunately, it didn't happen, but that was the vibe of a lot of Hatebreed shows, and I can totally see why to most people that would be a turnoff. Any normal person would be like, fuck this, I don't want to have to worry about getting punched in the face with brass knuckles when I'm just trying to watch a band. And so I completely understand that, but this gets to my point about the duality. The fact that they tap into those super dark emotions of anger and violence is exactly why the positive part of their message also resonates with people. For example, one of the central themes you'll hear in a lot of their music is the idea that your mistakes or any of the fucked up stuff that may have happened to you in the past doesn't have to define you and hold you back.
Behold the fire of redemption. Oh, become the fuse. Let this be the catalyst of action.
This one was a really big one for me because, to make a long story short, my mom was a very fucked up person. A lot of terrible things happened to her when she was younger. And so because of that, she was an alcoholic who was married 4 times, just was completely incapable of having meaningful relationships. And I saw how unhappy she was, and I always swore that I was not gonna be like her. But then guess what? I ended up making a lot of exactly the same mistakes that she did, as far as drugs and failed relationships and shit like that. And for a while there, I was like, fuck it. I guess this is just who I am. I guess I'm destined to be a fuck up just like my mom. I just kind of like resigned myself to that fate, like it was inevitable, until I snapped out of it and I said, no, fuck that. I'm not admitting defeat. I am not gonna be that person. And here I am 10 years later, very, very happily married. We own a house. I haven't had any interest in drugs or drinking in years. And all those mistakes I made are so far in the rearview mirror that it just kind of seems like a different person, someone that I don't even know. Or cutting out all the negative people in your life who are holding you back with their bullshit.
It's in their nature to try to destroy what they know they cannot create.
Which is a super important thing that people need to hear, because unfortunately, the truth is that the scene is fucking full of these negative people, and the only choice that you have after a certain point is just to cut them off. And most of all, if there's any one consistent message in their lyrics, it's to believe in yourself. To believe that you are in control of your life. That no matter what fucked up things may have happened to you, or what kind of structural barriers you may face that may make life harder for you than it is for someone else, that you can pull yourself out of the darkness by sheer force of will and create the life that you want.
Realize hope isn't short of your grasp. Resurrect every dream that you buried alive, and never succumb to the one that you fight in your heart.
And I've heard a lot of people say that they think Hatebreed is corny because of these messages, like it's some sort of Jocko or Tony Robbins kind of shit. And you know what I think is fucking corny? That standard punk message of identifying as a loser and a failure and admitting defeat. I think that is the corniest fucking thing of all. I mean, compare this
Times are hard, getting harder. I'm born to lose and destined to fail.
to this.
Every burden, every cycle strike, turn down. Every cage, every fucking fight, turn down. Distorted notions of who you are, turn down.
Seeing those two back to back like that, and what a huge contrast there is between them, and the message that they send, it fucking pisses me off that there's so many bands that filled our heads with this negative, self-limiting bullshit. If even one kid heard one of those negative songs and said, you know what, maybe my stepdad was right, I am a fucking loser, I'm never gonna amount to anything. That's fucked up, and those bands should be ashamed of themselves.
Defeatist! You and I will never be the same!
Of course, everybody is free to say whatever they want in their art, and maybe they don't feel like they have any responsibility to say or do anything that will help anyone. But personally, I just can't get behind any artist that tells their audience to give up just because they did. And that's certainly something you will never ever hear in a Hatebreed song. So you can see that for as much of a Chad metal, like dude bro fight music reputation that they have, their message is actually very positive. Much more positive than a lot of people who hate on them. And here's where that duality really comes into play, and why it's so important. Because the kind of person whose idea of a fun Saturday night is to do a couple key bumps and get in a fight with a stranger is not gonna listen to that positive message from some Ned Flanders type dude.
Purple drapes. All my life I've wanted purple drapes.
They're only gonna listen to somebody that they identify with, which is why Hatebreed has to be Hatebreed and not Lovebreed. So that is the real misunderstood genius of Hatebreed, that duality. The embrace of darkness and light. That they don't hide from the dark, negative shit, but that they also don't stop there. That ultimately their message is about overcoming, about taking control of your life, refusing to let your past mistakes define you, and being a better person. And I'm not gonna be one of those people that says like, oh, this band saved my life, because a band can't save your life, only you can save yourself. But sometimes just hearing the right thing from the right person at the right time can help a lot. For me, I remember it like it was yesterday, in October of 2009, after the absolute worst year of my life where I felt like I was just hanging on by a tiny thread, listening to Hollow Ground on the way to my first day of work at a new job that was like a huge step up for me, in a new city, away from all the bad shit I'd been involved in, and just being like, holy shit, I made it. I survived that year. I'm gonna be okay. Artists who have that kind of duality are very rare, but those are the ones that almost always resonate the most with me. Motion City Soundtrack is another one. They have that dynamic of like really poppy, catchy music, but with very dark, but ultimately hopeful lyrics.
I so wanna get back on track, and I'll do whatever it takes, even if it kills me.
Cro-Mags are another one. People probably know them for a lot of their like crazy street stories, but if you actually read their lyrics, their message is actually about desperately struggling not to be that person and not to live that way. Or on the pop side of things, there's artists like Kesha or Demi Lovato who've been through some very heavy shit. Like Demi Lovato's song about relapsing is not that far off from Blood for Blood or Hatebreed.
Wake me when the shakes are gone and the cold sweats disappear.
So for the people who had Hatebreed in that Chad metal category with Five Finger Death Punch or whatever, you can see that they're way, way deeper than that. The duality and introspection in their music is actually pretty nuanced. There's not many artists that can live in both of those worlds simultaneously. And lastly, their lyrics and music aside, I think you also have to give Jamey Jasta a lot of credit for everything he's done for the scene and just the dude's fucking work ethic. When he was just a kid, like 16 years old, he had started out booking shows in Connecticut, brought a ton of bands through there. He also had a label and a distro that was bringing like some extreme metal stuff into hardcore way before that was cool. Like I remember buying, I think, a Deeds of Flesh CD from him in like 1997, back when it was really hard to find that stuff. And as you may remember, later on, he was the host of the rebooted Headbangers Ball back in the mid-2000s, which is a big deal. Like having him on there was a huge credibility boost for metal and hardcore, and I think probably not a small part of why metalcore blew up the way it did around then. And he's basically doing the same thing with his podcast now, the Jasta Show. You can say what you want, but the dude is a machine who's really done a lot for the scene. I also want to give a special shout out to Hatebreed's guitarist Frank, who used to be in Integrity and Ringworm, and also had an awesome VHS bootleg list back in the day. I remember in high school I bought a tape from him with like Gorilla Biscuits and Morbid Angel on it and watched that thing until I wore it out. So there you have it. If you're already a Hatebreed fan, hopefully you enjoyed this one. And if you weren't a Hatebreed fan before, maybe you are now, or maybe you at least see them in a little bit of a different light. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would love to know how you guys see this band and what you think of their message. Before I let you go, I also wanted to mention that I dropped a bunch of new merch like this shirt, which you can get at the link in the description. And as always, I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, especially those who support at the True Cult level or above. It is because of your support that we're able to do a lot of stuff, but in particular the podcast. That's how I pay our producer and editor, Deanna, who makes the whole thing happen. Patrons get access to every podcast a week early. There's a members-only private Discord server that I'm in. I started doing patron-only Q&As. There's a way to have me review your music or artwork or video or podcast or YouTube channel or anything else you might want to get my feedback on. So if that sounds interesting, you can hit the link to that in the description as well. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.